Gravel sliced beneath Emma's bare feet as she ran into the dark woods, breath sharp and ragged, each step echoing terror. The night air carried whispers that weren't her own. "They will find you," Daniel said, voice low and merciless. Emma's pulse thundered as branches tore at her arms, drawing thin lines of blood she barely felt. The moon was fractured behind thick clouds, light snapping in and out like broken promises. A locked door slammed in her mind, sealing memories she didn't dare remember. Behind her, Mark's laughter rang hollow, not of joy but of obedience, each sound meant to remind her she wasn't free. "Stop, Emma!" Mark shouted. "You'll only make it worse." Her chest tightened, fear and hope clashing like fire and water. Every shadow looked alive, twisting into forms that lunged, retreated, lunged again. She thought of Sarah, her sister's gentle smile now twisted by devotion to a false savior. Betrayal sat like glass in her lungs. Emma whispered, "I can't go back." Her whisper cracked against the night, a vow swallowed by darkness. Every second stretched longer than time should allow, every sound sharpened until even her heartbeat felt like a beacon. Somewhere ahead, the forest promised either death or freedom. She ran harder, even as her legs screamed. Emma's legs burned, but she forced herself through the forest, lungs dragging in icy air. The silence between her footsteps felt heavier than sound. Daniel's voice still echoed inside her head like poison. She remembered his hand on her shoulder once, soft but binding, telling her that loyalty was salvation. Mark shouted again from behind, his words sharp enough to slice, "Come back before you lose everything." Emma's chest twisted at the memory of Sarah standing by Daniel's side, smiling as if devotion was love. Betrayal had stolen her sister long before escape stole Emma's courage. She whispered to herself, "I am not theirs anymore." But the trees closed in like walls, and the forest floor swallowed her steps, making every move feel like a trap. The forest breathed like it was alive, each rustle a whisper, each crack a warning. Emma stopped for a second, bending over, hands on her knees, gasping. Her mind split between terror and longing. She wanted her sister's voice again, not twisted by chance, but warm with childhood secrets. Yet Sarah's smile had belonged to Daniel now, her devotion replacing love. Emma clenched her fists, blood sticking between her fingers. She muttered, "They can't have me too." The silence answered with a crow's caw, jagged and mocking. Emma pressed against a thick trunk, heart pounding like a war drum. She could hear Mark crashing through brush nearby, his heavy breathing cutting through the night. Daniel's calm voice floated, closer now, every word deliberate. "Loyalty saves, rebellion kills." Emma bit her lip until copper filled her mouth. She thought of Sarah's hands once holding hers, now folded in prayer for a false savior. Shadows twisted around Emma, forming faces she once trusted, now enemies. Fear tightened around her, but defiance sparked like a match in a storm. She swore silently. She would not die here. Emma forced herself forward again, pain forgotten, only survival remained. Her mind replayed Daniel's sermons, the promises of heaven and the punishments of fire, until even silence felt like a cage. She thought of Sarah's voice chanting, her eyes vacant. Emma whispered, "I'll save you or die trying." Every word shook, but they carried truth. Gravel cut deeper into her feet, yet she didn't slow. Ahead, faint lantern light glowed, the first sign of something beyond this nightmare. The forest screamed behind her, but Emma ran toward the unknown. Emma remembered the first night she entered the compound, her heart soft and searching, drawn by promises of family. Daniel's voice had been warm then, soothing, like the father she wished she'd had. He said, "You are safe here." Sarah held her hand, eyes glowing with trust, and whispered, "We finally belong." The compound gates closed with a sound like finality, yet Emma thought it was protection. Inside, laughter floated in the air, not the hollow kind of now, but music to ears longing for peace. Mark had smiled at her too, softer once before obedience hardened him. He said, "Here no one is alone." Emma believed. She was tired of being invisible in the world outside, tired of empty nights. She wanted to be held by something bigger than herself, and the cult had filled that hole. But belonging soon became chains, and what once felt like love now burned like fire. Emma sat in the gathering hall, the smell of incense thick in the air, her hands folded as Daniel spoke of unity. His words wove webs, each syllable wrapping tighter around her longing heart. Sarah sat close, nodding with shining eyes, her voice blending into the chant. Emma wanted to believe every word, because believing felt easier than questioning. Daniel said, "The world outside abandoned you, but I will never leave." She believed, because abandonment had been her only constant. Mark stood at the edge of the room, silent, his eyes steady, watching her for any flicker of doubt. Emma closed her eyes and let the chant wash over her, letting herself be carried like a river, even as her soul whispered questions she dared not speak. Emma remembered the night Daniel told his story, his voice breaking with false vulnerability, saying he had been chosen after suffering alone. He looked into her eyes as if he saw her pain, and she let him. Sarah whispered, "He understands us." Emma wanted to believe, because no one else had ever seen her wounds. Mark knelt by Daniel's side, strong and loyal, the perfect disciple. Daniel said, "Pain is the proof you are meant for greatness." Emma pressed her hands into her lap, trembling. She wanted her pain to mean something. She wanted to believe she had been saved, not trapped. That night, for the first time in years, she cried openly, and no one mocked her. Instead, they embraced her. She thought it was love. Emma lay awake in her wooden bunk, Sarah breathing softly beside her, moonlight spilling through cracks in the roof. She whispered, "Do you ever miss home?" Sarah turned with dreamy eyes, saying, "This is home." Emma wanted to argue, but Sarah's face glowed with serenity. She remembered her mother's arms, long gone, and her father's silence, a wound still open. Here, at least, someone looked at her like she mattered. She clutched the blanket tighter, afraid to lose this fragile illusion. Outside, Mark walked past, heavy boots echoing in the night, his watchful presence reminding her the gates were locked. Freedom felt distant, but warmth was near, and for a moment she let herself pretend it was enough. Emma sat by the fire pit, warmth licking her skin as Daniel spoke again. His voice was like honey, sweet yet binding. He said, "Loyalty will keep you safe." The others repeated his words, and Emma's lips moved, though her heart hesitated. Sarah's voice was strongest, her smile radiant in the firelight. Emma stared at her sister and thought, if she believes, maybe I can too. Mark circled the group, eyes sharp, searching for hesitation. Emma felt his gaze linger on her, and she forced herself to nod, to smile, to pretend she was whole. For a heartbeat, she believed. For a heartbeat, she thought the fire was home. Then the wind carried the faint cry of the world beyond, and the illusion cracked like glass. Morning light spilled into the compound, but warmth never touched Emma's skin. Daniel stood before the group, his voice sharp as a blade hidden in silk. He said, "Obedience is love, rebellion is death." Emma's stomach turned at the words, but she whispered them back because silence would betray her doubt. Sarah repeated louder, eyes locked with Daniel, devotion shining. Emma remembered the girl who once laughed at silly jokes, now replaced by someone who would report her own sister for hesitation. Mark paced the rows, watching every mouth, every breath, ready to strike if one faltered. The chant grew heavier, drowning thought, filling every crack in Emma's soul with chains. She told herself she could survive if she just kept nodding. Yet deep inside, something clawed at her, screaming against the silence she was forced to wear. The rules tightened like ropes. Meals were timed, prayers mandatory, silence demanded. Emma's voice had once been her freedom, but now she feared the weight of her own words. She remembered laughing once, the sound foreign now. Daniel said, "Every action is seen, every thought is known." Sarah repeated after him with eager certainty, clutching Emma's hand as if to guide her deeper into the chains. Emma forced a smile, her heart pounding with dread. Mark barked an order for someone to kneel, and the sight of swift punishment silenced every whisper of rebellion. Emma lowered her gaze, hiding the storm in her eyes. She whispered inside her mind, "Survive, no matter what it costs." Emma scrubbed the floors until her hands bled, gravel embedded in her skin, but Daniel's words echoed louder than pain. He said, "Labor purifies the spirit." Sarah knelt nearby, working with serene obedience, humming the chants as if they were lullabies. Emma wanted to scream at her to wake up, but the fear of Mark's eyes kept her silent. He stood nearby, arms crossed, expression cold, watching as though ready to strike. Emma's back ached, her knees bruised, yet she pressed harder. She whispered to herself, "I am still me, I am still me," like a secret shield. But doubt twisted through her veins, whispering she was losing herself piece by piece. At night, Emma lay awake, listening to the chanting still echoing in her ears. The repetition hollowed her, turning her thoughts into their words. Sarah whispered in her sleep, murmuring Daniel's name like a prayer. Emma turned away, tears wetting the wooden boards. She wanted her sister back, but the girl she loved was buried in doctrine. Mark's heavy footsteps passed outside the bunkroom, his shadow crossing the moonlight cracks. She clenched her fists, nails cutting skin, to remind herself pain was hers, not his. Daniel's sermons promised salvation, but she only felt chains. She whispered into the darkness, "I can't breathe." The silence answered back with suffocating weight. Morning punishment gathered them in the courtyard. A young boy had broken a rule, whispering when silence was commanded. Daniel's voice cut the air as he declared, "Disobedience brings suffering." The boy trembled, his small frame shaking as Mark dragged him forward. Emma's chest twisted, watching innocence crushed beneath cruelty. Sarah whispered, "This is love. It saves him." Emma's stomach churned with rage and grief. She wanted to shout, to run, but fear locked her jaw. The boy's cries echoed, and Emma felt the weight of her own silence pressing harder than chains. She whispered to herself, "If I stay silent, I am part of this." The thought burned like fire inside her, but she forced her eyes to stay open, forced herself to witness. The courtyard was silent as Daniel raised his hand, eyes glowing with false divinity. Emma felt the air shift, the weight of something unspoken pressing against her chest. He said, "The purest love is sacrifice." His words cut through the group like a blade. Sarah stepped forward, face calm, smile radiant, and Emma's breath froze. Her sister's voice rang clear, "I will show my loyalty." Emma's heart cracked as realization struck. Sarah was not protecting her. She was delivering her. Mark's hand gripped Emma's shoulder with crushing force, dragging her forward. Emma whispered, "Sarah, don't." Sarah's eyes softened only for a second, then hardened again with obedience. Betrayal tasted like ash in Emma's mouth, sharp and bitter. Emma stumbled as Mark forced her to kneel. Dust rose around her, clinging to her sweat-damp skin. Daniel's voice boomed, "Loyalty demands proof." Sarah's gaze lingered on Emma, filled with something that looked like love twisted into cruelty. She whispered, "This will save you." Emma shook her head violently, tears streaking dirt down her cheeks. Daniel leaned closer, his tone dripping with venom masked as mercy. "Your sister has chosen truth. You must let go of rebellion." Emma's body shook, not from fear of death, but from the unbearable sting of betrayal. Her own blood, her own sister, had turned her in. Emma's chest heaved as Daniel circled her like a predator. He said, "Every family must bleed to prove devotion." The words wrapped around her like chains, each syllable choking air from her lungs. Sarah's hands trembled as she held a small blade, her eyes glistening with tears that refused to fall. Emma's voice cracked. "Sarah, you don't have to do this." For a heartbeat, Sarah's lips quivered, as though the girl Emma once knew wanted to return. But then Daniel's voice thundered, "Show me your love." Sarah lifted the blade and Emma's scream tore through the silence, a cry of both rage and heartbreak. The moment was seared into her soul, unerasable. The knife hovered inches from Emma's skin, Sarah's hand trembling like a fragile leaf. Emma whispered, "Remember when we promised to never leave each other?" The words hung heavy, echoing against Sarah's silence. Daniel leaned closer, whispering into Sarah's ear like a serpent. "Love her enough to save her soul." Sarah's expression hardened, tears finally spilling as she pressed forward. Emma's scream fractured the sky, but the blade only grazed her arm before Daniel snatched it away, smiling with satisfaction. He said, "Loyalty proven." Emma's body shook with rage, betrayal burning hotter than pain. She looked into Sarah's eyes and saw not her sister, but a stranger in chains. The crowd erupted in chants, their voices thick with devotion, drowning Emma's cries. Daniel raised Sarah's hand like a victor, announcing, "This is loyalty. This is salvation." Sarah stood pale, broken inside though her face remained devoted. Emma collapsed forward, blood dripping, her breath ragged, betrayal carved deeper than wounds. Mark's grip tightened on her arms, forcing her upright, his face unreadable. Emma whispered through clenched teeth, "You've destroyed me, Sarah." But her sister only looked away, tears hidden by the chant's thunder. Daniel's smile widened, feeding on Emma's suffering. In that moment, Emma realized loyalty was not love. It was destruction dressed as devotion. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the crackle of torches. Emma's arm still burned where Sarah's blade had grazed her, a wound more in spirit than flesh. Daniel's voice filled the courtyard again, heavy and final. He said, "Let tonight prove who belongs and who betrays." Emma's chest heaved as Mark dragged her forward, his grip like iron, his expression carved in stone. Sarah's eyes avoided hers, glowing with tears hidden beneath devotion. Emma whispered under her breath, "I will not die here." The chant rose louder, pounding like war drums, drowning every doubt. Her body trembled, but her spirit sharpened. Every step closer to Daniel was a step toward a decision she could no longer run from. Daniel leaned forward, eyes piercing Emma's soul, his smile thin and cruel. He said, "Rebellion must be burned away." The crowd roared, their chant echoing in unison. Emma's heart pounded, her hands shaking as Mark forced her to kneel again. She caught Sarah's gaze for only a heartbeat, seeing the sister she once loved buried behind obedience. Emma whispered, "I forgive you," though the words tore her throat raw. Sarah blinked, lips parting, but her voice never came. Daniel lifted a torch, holding it above Emma as though flames could purify her. The heat licked her skin, but instead of bowing, she lifted her chin, her eyes locking with his, defiant and unbroken. The moment stretched like eternity, the torch blazing above Emma's head. The crowd's chant became deafening, pounding against her skull like hammers. Daniel lowered the torch slowly, savoring fear, but Emma's defiance only grew sharper. She spat. "Your lies cannot own me." Gasps rippled through the gathering, Sarah's lips trembling, Mark tightening his grip until her arms ached. Daniel's eyes darkened, fury breaking through his mask. He hissed, "Then you choose death." In that instant, Emma surged upward with all her strength, slamming into Daniel, knocking the torch from his grasp. Flames erupted against the ground, scattering embers into the night. Panic cracked the chant, screams breaking through devotion. Chaos exploded as the torch fire spread across the dry courtyard floor, smoke curling upward. Emma twisted free from Mark's stunned grip, her body screaming with pain but fueled by desperation. She sprinted toward the open path, her breath ragged. Daniel shouted behind her, his voice sharp as a blade, "She is cursed! Stop her!" The cult members hesitated, their faith rattled by fire and defiance. Sarah screamed Emma's name, her voice breaking through the chaos. Emma's legs carried her faster than fear, each step pounding with survival's urgency. She thought, "This is the moment, life or death." The smoke swallowed her, blurring faces, blurring chains, blurring betrayal. Emma burst through the gates, lungs on fire, feet raw against the gravel. Behind her, the compound howled with chants, screams, and fire. Daniel's voice still carried, echoing like a curse through the smoke. She didn't look back, Not even when Sarah cried out, not even when Mark shouted her name in rage. The night swallowed her, stars blurred by tears, air sharp with freedom's bite. Every step into the unknown cut deeper than chains ever had, but she ran anyway, driven by a heartbeat that refused to stop. She whispered through ragged breath, "I am alive." The words felt like rebellion, like truth, like victory. She didn't know what awaited beyond, but she knew she had broken the cage. The forest swallowed Emma, the night air sharp as knives against her raw skin. Her feet bled across stones, each step a reminder she was free yet wounded. She collapsed against a tree, chest heaving, sobs tearing loose like storms. The compound's fire still glowed in the distance, smoke rising like a shadow that would never vanish. She whispered, "I left them, but they'll never leave me." Her body trembled with exhaustion, yet her mind replayed every chant, every scream, every betrayal. Sarah's face haunted her, eyes shining with devotion twisted into cruelty. Emma pressed her forehead against bark, grounding herself in pain to remember she was still real. She thought, freedom costs more than chains. At dawn, Emma stumbled into a clearing, sunlight breaking across her face like a cruel mercy. Birds sang, but their music felt foreign, sharp against the silence that had ruled her life. She collapsed to her knees, letting warmth touch her skin, though she felt undeserving. She whispered, "I should feel safe, but I don't." Her hands shook as she washed blood from her arm in dew-covered grass, watching crimson vanish, but never feeling clean. Memories poured in, Daniel's voice declaring her cursed, Sarah's whisper promising betrayal as salvation. Emma pressed her palms to her ears, but silence only amplified the voices inside. Freedom felt too heavy, too sharp, like a gift she didn't know how to hold. She wandered into a small village, eyes hollow, body frail. Strangers stared, their faces filled with questions she could not answer. A woman offered her water, and Emma's hands shook so violently the cup spilled. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice foreign in her own ears. Every kindness felt sharp, as if it could cut through her fragile skin. She remembered Daniel's sermons, the chants, the punishments, and guilt flared in her chest. She had left others behind. Sarah's face rose again, her hand clutching the knife, her tears hidden behind obedience. Emma closed her eyes, whispering, "I couldn't save her." The villagers exchanged worried glances, but Emma kept walking, carrying her ghosts. That night, Emma sat by a stranger's fire, warmth brushing her skin but not reaching her heart. Flames reminded her of torches, chants, and smoke rising over loyalty, disguised as love. She whispered, "I am alive, but not whole." Her hands shook as she touched the scar on her arm where Sarah's blade had grazed her. She remembered Sarah's tears, Daniel's smile, Mark's grip, and the boy punished for a whisper. Every image clawed into her mind, refusing to fade. She curled into herself, pulling her knees tight, rocking to the rhythm of survival. Freedom felt like silence too loud to bear. She thought, escaping walls does not erase chains. Days passed, but Emma's nightmares remained. She woke screaming, hearing chants echo in her dreams, Sarah's voice whispering devotion, Daniel's words promising death. She sat by a river, staring into water that reflected her face fractured by ripples. She whispered, "Who am I now?" Her reflection offered no answer, only the broken image of someone who had survived at a price too high. Villagers spoke gently, but their kindness only deepened her ache, reminding her how much she had lost. She pressed her palm against her scar, a reminder loyalty had nearly killed her. Yet she also breathed, and in each breath lay proof she had chosen life. The shadow of the cult clung, but so did survival. Emma walked along a lonely road at dusk, each step heavy as if carrying the weight of chains that still clung invisibly. The sky bled red across the horizon, reminding her of fire and betrayal. She whispered, "The world outside is quiet, but my mind is not." Passing travelers glanced at her, eyes filled with curiosity, but she kept her gaze low, afraid they would see her brokenness. Her body was free, yet her spirit remained shackled to chance that would not fade. Sarah's face rose again, smiling through tears as she betrayed her. Daniel's voice echoed, promising that loyalty was salvation. Emma tightened her fists until her palms ached, grounding herself in the only truth left. She was alive. She found herself in a small inn, warmth of candles glowing against wooden walls. A kind stranger asked her name, and Emma froze. Her lips parted, but silence filled the space instead. She thought, I don't know who I am anymore. Her identity had been carved away, replaced with echoes of obedience. The stranger smiled gently, leaving food by her side. She whispered, "Thank you," though the words felt fragile, as if borrowed. The smell of bread should have comforted her, but it reminded her of Daniel's voice declaring hunger a test of faith. She forced herself to eat, each bite a battle against memories. The fire crackled, yet in her mind torches still burned. That night, Emma dreamed she was back in the compound. Sarah stood before her, blade in hand, tears streaming as chants rose in the air. Daniel whispered in the shadows, his voice dripping with venom. Loyalty saves, rebellion kills. Emma woke gasping, drenched in sweat, the echo of chanting still alive in her ears. She clutched her scarred arm, nails digging into skin, desperate to remind herself she was free. The inn's silence felt like suffocation, her breath shallow as fear gripped her. She whispered, "I escaped the place, but not the chains." Tears slid down her cheeks, and for the first time, she wondered if the chains would ever break. Days later, Emma stood by a riverbank, wind carrying the scent of pine and water. She stared at her reflection rippling in the current, fractured and shifting. She whispered, "I am not the girl who entered those gates." Sarah's face appeared in her memory, both loving sister and betrayer, and Emma's chest tightened. Daniel's smile haunted her, his words cutting through silence like knives. Mark's grip still lingered on her arms, phantom bruises she couldn't erase. She touched her scar, a reminder of loyalty turned into destruction. Then she breathed deeply, the river's song steady and calm. She thought, "I am broken, but I am still breathing." Emma walked into the forest once more, shadows stretching long as evening fell. The world was quiet, but inside her mind, the chants whispered still. She whispered, "I survived, but survival has a price." Her footsteps echoed against gravel, a reminder of her escape, of blood and betrayal. She paused, listening to silence that was never truly empty. Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "I still hear them chanting in my dreams." The words clung to the air, sharp as knives, final as scars. She turned toward the horizon, where darkness and light collided, and kept walking. The cult was behind her, but it would never truly leave. The story ended not with peace, but with survival etched in pain.